I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you'll love that title story too. Here's our first one. Something a little different. One fire department's humble fight against an HOA. Posted by Zerbo. Just throwing out this story because I know you folks will get a kick out of it. While I am fortunate enough to not live in a neighborhood with an HOA, I'm a firefighter for a suburban district that is chock full of them. Big ones, small ones, old ones, brand new ones. HOAs freaking everywhere. For the most part, they aren't a hassle. They gate off their private roads, but as long as they put a sensor on it or a padlock that uses our standard department key, it's not an issue. Enter the Views. The Views are condos built in the late 70s, and as far as I can tell, the only view they have is of a freeway on-ramp and some eucalyptus trees. The Views were built along a narrow road that starts and ends off of the main road, making one big loop about a quarter-mile long with a couple cul-de-sacs branching off. It's important to note that the driveways for each end of the loop are about 30 feet apart off of the same road. The Views have a lot of older residents, so we're there semi-frequently for medical aids, people smoking out their kitchens when they forget about the food they left on the stove, and even the occasional structure fire. Responding there is annoying because they built speed bumps about every 25 feet along this loop. So once you're in the Views, you're not getting anywhere fast. Annoying, yeah, but it's a private road, so they can technically build as many speed bumps as they want. Enter the chain. About a third of the way along the loop from the first driveway, there is a chain across the road, padlocked to a steel pole on one side. It's a generic master brand lock to which we do not have a key. Why is it there? What does it do? Why would anyone build something like that? The answer to all three of these questions is, who the heck knows? The chain has been in place as long as I've been working at this department, and nobody can tell me exactly why it's still a thing. Phone calls to the HOA regarding the chain went unanswered and unreturned. The problem with the chain is its location. If we're responding to an address that's closer to the first driveway but just past the chain, we would have to go the long way around to get there. The operative word here is would. When COVID was really ramping up in the early 2020, we were at the Views a lot, sometimes 2 or 3 times a shift. Approaching from the main road, we always take the first driveway because heck, taking that long way, someone called 911, we're going to get there quickly. That's what we're paid to do. So when the address came up on the other side of the chain, it was unanimously decided that we take the path of least resistance. Enter the bolt cutters. Every time we needed to get to an address past the chain, I would hop out of the engine, grab the bolt cutters, and snip a link. Chain goes down, engine and ambulance go through. Simple solution. After about a week of this, and many mysteriously replaced chains, the enigma of the chain was finally revealed. One night, as I have a hapless link firmly in the grasp of my bolt cutters, I hear a shrill shriek. Stop! A middle-aged woman comes speed-walking out of the condo right next to the chain. I'm the HOA president, that's there for a reason. I want to hear all about that reason, but we're here for a response, and the clock is ticking. Snap! Another link is broken, the chain falls slack, and onward we go. We resolve that we'll stop by her unit after we clear the call to let her know what a nuisance the chain is, and that something needs to be done about it. This course of action was ultimately unnecessary, as HOA president took it upon herself to huff and puff after us as we drove away, and came speed-walking up again as we pulled up to the response address. I went inside with the ambulance crew, but I could hear her shrieking at my captain outside. We wrap up the call, get the patient loaded into the ambulance, and she's still going off on him. What it basically boiled down to was that she took it upon herself to install the chain because she didn't want people using the road as a thoroughfare. The reasoning behind this is an utter mystery to a rational mind because it's a loop. that begins and ends on the same road, 30 feet apart. No one is using the views as a thoroughfare. The chain got installed where it is because that's where her condo is. She demands that we just go the long way for addresses past the chain, and we explain that it hinders response time. She does not accept this. It takes my captain asking her that if her unit was on fire and we were responding from the other direction down the main road, would she want us to take an extra minute going the long way, or just cut the chain and get to her unit faster? She acquiesces that she had not considered this, but also refuses to do anything about the chain. War it is then. Every opportunity we got, we cut that frickin' chain. Never maliciously, only out of necessity, but it was necessary to the point where it was getting comical. A pile of snapped chain links lay discarded in the gutter. She made numerous attempts at peace. What if we just notified her when we needed it unlocked? No. What if we just cut a link on one end instead of down the middle? Sorry, middle is faster. What if she just gave us a key to the lock? Sorry, but if it's not the department-issued lock, we're not going to take the time to dig through the key box. One day, as I hopped out to gleefully cut the chain as always, something was different. Zip ties. Tired of buying new chains, or perhaps the chain fund had dried up, HOA president had resorted to zip tying the chain back together where we had cut it. She even attached a tag saying, "Fire Department, cut zip tie only." After consulting with my captain, we decided upon the most prudent course of action. I didn't have a pair of scissors on me, but I sure as heck had a pair of bolt cutters. Snap! Dead center in one of the remaining links of chain. And so it went, as the chain got gradually shorter and shorter and became more zip tie than chain. Despite her rushing out of her condo when the engine pulled up to the chain, we were always faster with the bolt cutters. The chain has been fully replaced a couple of times, and the same cycle has ensued, until one day, last week, when everything changed. Enter the gate. As we responded to the views, we pulled up to the chain. I already had the bolt cutters out and ready to go, only to be greeted with the most unexpected surprise. Where the chain had once stretched across the road, impotent in the face of our departmental onslaught, now loomed a 2-arm swinging gate. A beefy one, too. They definitely assessed some new HOA fees to pay for this beast. On cue, out came HOA president. This time, she said nothing, only crossed her arms in defiance and looked on with a smirk. I assessed this new obstacle for a second. Too thick to ram it through, plus that would damage the engine. Tubular steel modeled on concrete anchored post, so no just lifting the gate off the hinge. "Looks like you'll be taking the long way from now on," she said, clearly having played this out in this exact scenario in her head countless times since having the gate installed. And she would be right, except the arms of the gate were secured by a length of chain wrapped around and padlocked. I looked straight at HOA president as I lined up the bolt cutters on a chain link and the padlock shackle. Snap. I have never, ever seen someone visibly deflate the way the HOA president did at that moment. I pushed the gate open and the engine drove through. As I climbed back into the engine, I heard her call out, "At least close it behind you." I probably don't need to tell you that I left that witch wide open. The icing on this cake is that we sent out fire marshals to check it out. While the chain technically met the definition for impeding emergency vehicle access, we let it slide due to it being so easily bypassed. The gate, however, was a massive violation of county codes. Despite being a private road, the number of residents along the loop in the views stipulated that any gate shall be automatically opening and have an emergency vehicle sensor. The gate fits neither of those criteria, so boom, 30-day notice to remove that crap or face massive fines from the county for impeding emergency vehicle access. So, in summary, we waged a years-long battle against one HOA president's desperate grasp to control a problem that never existed in the first place. And if that doesn't capture HOAs in a nutshell, I don't know what does. HOA member doesn't know the rules as well as he thinks, posted by Spec97. This story primarily takes place between me and Crappy Neighbor, who is a member of my community's HOA. Sorry if it's a bit long. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that's basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community. This is important later, with the front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now, my roommates and I, we admittedly have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can only usually get one car in the garage. When all the parking in the free spots is full, we just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day, Crappy Neighbor came up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment just really made him sound like a butt, and he wasn't really necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know as we just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, Crappy Neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good, you'd better not, because I'll be watching." Well, from then on, we did follow those rules. If we parked in the front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one fateful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m., he went to head out and his car was gone. Guess who was there though? Crappy Neighbor standing right outside. Immediately he said to my roommates, "Told you were going to get towed if you parked here again." Crappy Neighbor and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're gonna charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been a butt to us since we moved in, and even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane, and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between Crappy Neighbor treating us like crap and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night, not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say to add to my point that this guy just sucked, I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home, and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see Crappy Neighbor's garage. I start to take note of when he parks his car out in front of the garage, and for about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would come home at around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the 3rd week, I decided that I would begin the revenge. One Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes, I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later, crappy neighbor came out and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd gotten his car. Now, it was funny to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home, but I wasn't done yet. See, this jackbutt apparently didn't learn the first time because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, crappy neighbor comes out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife, and then goes to get it. Now, after this time, he's a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is that he does in there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company and off his car goes again. And again, this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this third time, I decided that I would stop because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at, as if it was her fault that he was a dummy. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't have gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever even found out that this fun little rule existed. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time, and they never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We've had a number of other encounters with him in that time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. My HOA is stealing from me. Help! Posted by Weekly Salamander 389. Hello, I live in a condo that has 6 units. I bought my condo last year and I've been here almost 10 months. The guy living in one of the units, we will call him Jay, is currently president of the HOA. He acquired this by default because the last president of the HOA moved out of our condo and he was the next longest owner. Every month, we pay $185 to Jay to cover our HOA fees. To my knowledge, these fees cover building insurance, water for the building, electric bill in common areas, other stuff like lawn maintenance, snow removal, and basically any other maintenance that's needed in the common areas. About 6 months in, one of my neighbors in the building stopped me to introduce himself. We'll call this neighbor O, and asked me what I thought about the building. The building obviously needs some TLC, which is why he asked me. So he told me that we should push the president, Jay, to make some fixes around here. At this point, we have an ugly front door, our hallways don't get cleaned, and rugs are starting to stain and smell. Water's leaking into the basement, mold's growing down there, and we don't have lawn or snow removal service, and well, nothing ever gets done. One day I see Jay and I make him aware of all these things. Jay tells me that our HOA fees are super cheap. I mean, it is cheap compared to others, and he's able to make it cheap by not paying others to do this stuff, and he does it all for us. He tells me he's going to jump on the mold ASAP. Meanwhile, O tells me that he's been asking for a receipt for paying his fees or some statements of where our HOA money goes because there never seems to be money for anything, but Jay always gives him the runaround. Fast forward a bit, Jay decides he's going to paint over the mold like it's going to solve our problem. It solved it for less than a week because the mold grew over that paint. Our storage lockers are in the basement and I decide to clean it out. I started to find some mold growing on my stuff, and I told Jay that painting doesn't get rid of mold, and him not taking care of things is starting to ruin my personal items. He told me things have always been like this, and I had to accept it pretty much. Now I'm asking him for a receipt and our HOA budget. He's refusing to provide me with any type of receipt or financial statements to show me why we don't have any money to fix things in our building. I told him that I am now suspicious of him because he won't provide this info, and he told me I should have bought somewhere else. So I started Googling the corporation where I write my HOA checks out to, and it turns out that corporation was dissolved in 2020, which is when the HOA presidency was passed on to Jay. I've only been here since 2022. By the way, Jay lives in a unit here with his mother. I'm 100% sure that she has a disability, probably dementia, but whatever it is, she doesn't have good memory. Anyway, I always hear this guy yelling at his mother and cursing at her very often. My dad was visiting me the other day and he heard Jay screaming, so he turned and he looked out his window and he swore that he saw Jay hitting someone, likely his mother. This guy is a problem. Help, what can I do? Where can I report him for the HOA? Do you think these commenters are pointing OP in the right direction with call the cops and get a lawyer and see a lawyer about this? If this guy's robbing the building or complex, you have the receipts. I would find out if you can withhold the money, put it in a different account. There's too many documents and possibly laws that would allow you to do something. Maybe talk to O and get the other tenants to go in together. What would you do? HOA secrets exposed, tax evasion, fraud, and extortion. How I uncovered it. Find out how by clicking on the video on the screen. You don't want to miss this story, and I'll see you there.